All right, claims I'm live, and there's 2 whole people here. So I'm gonna give folks just a minute to come in. Maybe we can get up to 5. That would be pretty cool. But I'll take 2 if that's all we get. Is there anything I can show? We're waiting. So the haircut robot has a new business end. The big problem with I don't know if you saw the live stream, I guess I should show the history. So the haircutting robot had this problem where it wouldn't always detect the head with the limit switches. There's 3 switches in kind of a, well, by definition, a triangular arrangement. And people's heads actually are a lot pointier than I thought they were. And it was possible, especially on the corners and back edge of your head, for it to just not hit the switches. And so we now have basically a booby trap plate that always fires no matter what. And then we've also got a pretty cool pattern trimmer. So the problem with cutting a pattern into the hair, man, I need a haircut, is that any misalignment between the tube and sort of the normal of your head at that point would cause the trimmer to not actually make good contact. So it would hit like this and only hit on the corner. And then also, if you don't have the exact depth right, you really can't safely cut up to their scalp, because you just have to plow the thing into their head. And so what this is it gives me, let's see if I can show it. It gives me full suspension on the cutter so that it can conform to the head however it is. And so this should allow me to go in and raster out whatever pattern I want. And you can also see it only has a few teeth. So we knocked most of the teeth off this trimmer, so it's much finer. So hopefully in the following week, the TSA actually broke the robot and lost some pieces. I didn't open it until later this week, and they had opened it up, and like one of the belts and some other pieces were missing. And so I'm working on rebuilding it. I ordered the parts, which should be here by Monday. But hopefully I'll be giving more haircuts. So it's not just Matt Pat with his gelled hair, which was nearly impossible to cut. We'll be doing it for real. I'll definitely be giving myself a haircut. I really need one. All right, we have 5 people. So let's jump into the questions. So as always, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. I'll answer probably all of them. I've never not answered all of them, unless there's some incredible rush that we've never had before. I doubt it. There's only 5 people. So let me choose a juicy question to kick things off. All right, so Elmer Fudd asked, in contrast to the useful tools that I normally talk about, what do I consider to be the least useful tool, or 5 tools? And so I went through my tools, and it was hard to narrow it down to 5, actually. And this is because I have a problem where I kind of buy really cheap tools the first time. My general tool buying strategy is if I don't know how much I'm going to use something or how good it's going to be, I will buy the cheapest one that I can get and then use that until it breaks. And then I know enough to get a better one, generally one of the best ones, depending on how much I'm using it. And so I have a lot of tools that I've bought the cheap version of initially, many of which still work. And I probably not very smartly have put up with them for years. And so the first category of my, like, if you're building a shop, just don't do it, is really cheap hand tools. So I've had Harbor Freight brand pliers and needle nose pliers, which are like $1 a pair, but they're terrible. Like the tips of the needle nose pliers don't line up, and like the cutters don't cut. There's just massive slop. They're just terrible. And they work just well enough that I've just been using these mostly. I don't have very many good hand tools because I bought a bunch of cheap Harbor Freight stuff. I've slowly been getting better stuff, and the stuff that I've gotten, like Nipex brand, Bondas, it's so much better, and they're not that much more expensive. These are terrible. Same thing with like Harbor Freight files or any import file. If you've used an actual, like a good brand file, the difference is crazy. These barely do anything. They're okay for SLA parts and stuff like that, really, really soft materials, but on steel, it's like they just don't even hardly do anything. I regret all of these. And then probably the biggest, most terrible one is actually the Harbor Freight clamps. These just don't work. I have a whole rack of these because they're really cheap, but they just don't even clamp. So awful. Allen keys, they just strip the bolts. So yeah, I recommend for those tools, just get a real brand. You're going to use them all the time. You're going to use them forever. These don't really break. They just suck. And so you're just going to kind of be stuck with them forever. So I regret all of those. Those are terrible. In general, I actually buy a lot of stuff from Harbor Freight, and I've had a lot of good experiences. Things with cutting blades and a lot of these hand tools are the one category of Harbor Freight stuff that I've had a bad experience with. And then the other thing that I've had a bad experience with is vices. So I have 2 of these drill press vices. They're awful. Like the jaw isn't even attached to the screw. I think it was for a day, but if you want to back it out, it doesn't actually pull the jaw back. They're terrible, and I continue to put up with them. I need to get a better one. And then I've also bought 2. I bought a vise from Harbor Freight, a bench vise, which worked for a month or 2, and then it snapped in half. Like it literally, the casting just cracked. Then I bought another one, and it cracked again. So that was a big waste of money. I regret those. I don't even have them anymore. I've had really terrible experiences with insert tooling, like the cheap insert tooling. So these are index cutters for a mill. I don't even know what kind of insert this is. It has no profile. It's just a flat insert, but they're terrible. They might be good for certain materials, but I've used them on steel. I've used them on aluminum. They're bad for common materials. I still use them a little bit, but they're pretty awful. And if you tried to use these in a smaller mill, like my knee mill has trouble with these, it would probably just like stall your motor. They're terrible. So a couple other big ones. So my lathe, the lathe is an interesting one. I consider this one of my worst, most regretted purchases, not because it's useless, but because I think it's a big opportunity cost. So that lathe was probably, I think I paid like $1,200 for it. And if you look at the world of small benchtop lathes, there's basically like super, super cheap $600. I think they're all made by the same factory in China. They're often, the generic name is Seig, S-E-I-G. They weigh like 30 pounds. They're terrible. And then there's kind of like a step above that, which is what I have, which is another import vise that weighs maybe 100 pounds, but it's also a really crummy import. And then if you pay maybe twice that, you can get a legitimately good benchtop lathe that basically everything about it is better. And so I've had that lathe for many years now at this point. I've made tons of parts on it, and every time I use it, it's terrible. Like a month after I got it, all the gears inside of it have been making a terrible noise. The chuck is ridiculously difficult to switch. There's pretty bad run out on a lot of stuff. It's just bad. There's no power cross feed. The tool post is awful. It's not stiff. There's grinding junk in the ways, really bad. And I just wish I would have gotten one level above that. I think I would have been a lot happier. I don't think it's the grass is always greener situation, because I have some tools that are one level above and they are way better. So that was a big regret. And then I guess I'll do one last and I'll stop. I could go on and on, but one last one is, this has actually proven to be completely useless. This I got probably, I don't know, 12 years ago. This is a flux core welder. I was under the impression when I got it, so I had no money. My wife, girlfriend at the time, bought this for me for Christmas, and I wanted to avoid buying gas and other things. And so I thought, I knew it wasn't great, but I thought at least in theory it would be able to weld material together. It can't. The amount of time I spent trying to weld stuff with this is pretty high, and I don't think I got one good weld ever. And I tried different wire. I tried turning this knob that doesn't seem to have any meaning, and I never ever got good welds with it. I know people do get successful welds with flux core welders, but these cheap Harbor Freight, Chicago Electric, it's awful. Do not recommend. Just get a MIG or something, or a name brand flux core. So those are probably my biggest regrets. I have one more. It sounds like it's kind of interesting. Like everything I'm saying is Harbor Freight. Even though I say Harbor Freight's pretty good, I guess there are some lemons. Never ever 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 buy a cheap tap and die set. I think these are like $20 for, you know, the price of like 2 taps. You get an entire set. They don't cut. They are kind of useful if you need to clean up a thread on a bolt. If you really, really, really need threads in something, I guess I've been able to force it through, but these are so bad. Yeah, useless. And I have a metric set too, so I regret those. But overall, my strategy of get the cheapest, use it till it breaks, learn what you don't know, and then upgrade has worked pretty well. I think I've saved a lot of money because I do have, most of my tools are imports, and they've been fine. All right. No questions. No one wants to know anything. Okay. So another Elmer Fudd question. Let me check that one off so I don't. Yeah. Since we're on the topic of tools, I guess. The question was basically, could I maintain a list of tool recommendations based on my experience? It would be useful, low price, mid price, high price. So this is an interesting question. I'm not an expert, so I'm not a tool reviewer. Typically, the tools that I have, I've maybe used 1 or 2 of them. I've read lots of reviews. I do a lot of research, but I'm not an expert. Probably the most useful thing that I could do is actually kind of outline the general criteria that I use to decide which of these tools to get and the things that I think are very important rather than specific tools, because I just don't know how good a random drill press is that I've never used. So I'll kind of just do a bit of that here, and then maybe I can write it down. That would actually be a good Patreon post. Let me write that down. And I don't know how many people are actually interested in buying these tools, but hopefully it's a lot because they're great. So probably one of the most expensive tools that people getting into machining are going to buy is some form of CNC or manual mill, and I have both. And I've talked a bit about why I have both in the past, but it basically comes down to that there's a set of things that you do that are very challenging or time consuming to do on a CNC machine that are very fast to do on a manual machine. So if you have some, say I have this vise and it sucks and I have a way to make it better, I need to cut a pocket in it. Doing that on the CNC takes a long time because I have to digitize, I have to CAD this vise, or at least a substantial portion of this vise, and then make tool paths and go through a whole complicated process to cut a little pocket. On the manual mill, I can just clamp it in the vise and cut a slot and I'm done. And a lot of the work that I do, I would categorize as kind of R&D, product development. It's one-off stuff like that. That's why I have the manual machine. And so that's kind of the first question that a lot of people have is, do I want CNC or do I want manual? And what it really comes down to is what types of things are you doing? The CNC is great for certain things that are just impossible to do on a manual machine. So if you want to do contoured surfaces, even moderately complex pockets that you can do on a manual machine, they take forever, they're easy to screw up. Or if you want to make many of something, it's also a lot faster on a CNC. You basically, the first part takes a long time, but then each one after that is a lot faster. So that's why I have both. I end up making multiples, and I also end up making a lot of stuff that would be impossible to make on the manual machine. When you're looking at a manual machine, one of the biggest concerns is just how much the thing weighs and its stiffness. So a big limitation, people will get little tiny manual mills, and you put a piece of steel in it and you just can't hardly cut any material, chatter off the table, just because they're not stiff. And then once you have a machine that's stiff, the other concern is horsepower. You'll go to take a cut and it just bogs down and you can't do it. Or you can't cut hard materials because it doesn't have torque at low speeds. And so just sort of fundamental capability is one of the biggest concerns. And then once you get past that, it's kind of just how crappy the thing is. So when you get on the really low end of the mills or the lathes, they don't actually have dials. If you're in the US and you're using inches, they have millimeter dials. So one turn will be 39 thousandths of an inch, but they claim that it's 40 thousandths of an inch. So it doesn't even go one full revolution isn't even going the distance that it says it's going. 40 thousandths of an inch is a terrible increment, because if you want to go 0.25 inches, you have to count by increments of 0.040, which is just really difficult for humans to do. They usually don't have any of the bells and whistles like power feeds or digital readouts. They're awful. So in general, my advice is similar to what you'll read online. You want to get as much weight and horsepower as you can afford. And then beyond that, the things that I think are really important are digital readout. That's probably the most important quality of life thing with a mill. It basically eliminates the dials. It just says, you are here in inches or millimeters, and you can turn the knob and it just keeps track of where you are. That is the most important thing. My lathe doesn't have one. It's awful. I regret it every time I use it. And then the other thing that I've used a few benchtop mills, though sometimes the really small ones, they'll put the controls in terrible spots, or they'll be really terrible to change speeds. Like they might have gears that you have to switch, or belts that are hard to access and tension to change the speeds. So that can be a huge time sink. And the other thing that can be a big time sink is if it's really time consuming to change tools. So depending on how they do the call-out system, it can be good or bad. And then there's a really terrible kind of mill, which you should avoid at all costs, that have, you can't change the height of where the head is at without losing your position. They have a cylindrical column. Jet makes some of these for some reason. You'll see them as like combination drill press mills. If you want to change the height, they don't work. I don't even know why they sell them. So don't get one of those. A couple other considerations if you're looking at a CNC. If it supports flood coolant is one of the biggest differences. So there's a huge range of CNC machines. There's little benchtop ones. There's routers, which typically are a lot less stiff, so they're not as good at doing harder materials. They tend to chatter more. But whether they're enclosed, whether they have flood coolant, that basically, in my opinion, dictates whether you can let the machine run without you being there or not. That's the reason I have this machine with a enclosure. That's why my little CNC machine also has an enclosure. If you want to just use it as a robot that makes parts for you, and you don't want to sit there with an air gun, you need flood, I think. There's some theoretical other ways of doing it, but yeah, not great. One sec, my wife just texted me something which might mean that she says the video is freezing. Let me know if it's freezing for you, and maybe I can try to do something about the connection. So anyway, yeah. So flood coolant, that's a huge decision. There's a lot of machines that just can't support it because they aren't waterproof, or they're the wrong, like you'll probably never put flood coolant on a router. And then things like a ProtoTrack, which is a large CNC'd version of a knee mill, kind of like my manual machine, those you could put an enclosure on it, but it's not really feasible. So that's a big one. And then the other thing to consider is just the general workflow. So the coolant dictates if you have to stand there and tend the machine or not. But then other things like how hard is it to change tools? Is it possible to change a tool without having to re-measure the height of the tool? So if you don't use CNC, one of the main things that you do is you have a bunch of tools set up, ideally, that you know the length of them. And then you can swap them in and out. And when you put another tool in, you say, this is tool 35, and the machine knows how long that tool is so that it can cut to the appropriate depth. But some machines, there's no way to actually do that. It's just like you stick the tool into a collet and there's nothing that registers its height. And so it's not possible to change tools in the middle of a program, you basically have to like cut and then stop and remeasure everything and then do the next cut. So if you have a thing where it does a spot drill and then a drill and then a mill, then a different mill, it's horrible to do if you have a machine that doesn't support tool holders that have a known height. One level beyond that's a tool changer, which is what my machine has. So I can just set up 10 tools and just let it run and I don't have to do anything. That's because I really value not having to stand there, because the whole point of it is to save me time. And so there's a bunch of concerns across the usability. I'm not going to go into all of them now. I'm happy to talk about it in the Discord if people are actually considering something. But things like the dial pendant that lets you jog the machine around, probing, that stuff can have a gigantic impact on how hard the machine is to use and how much time you spend to make a part. The same sorts of things apply to plasma cutters. They have some unique things, but again, I'm not going to go into all the details here. All right, people are saying no freezing, so it's a wife made here problem. And then I guess the one other category of things is laser cutters. So I'm not a laser cutter expert. I've used a couple at work. I have a Glowforge, and then I know some folks that have cheap Chinese ones. And they're kind of similar, where basically the cheap ones are a little crappier. They tend to take a lot more work to maintain them. They're a little harder to use. Usually the software is kind of terrible, but they're a lot cheaper. And then as you get to more expensive ones, they get faster, they're more capable. Not necessarily easier to use. It depends on the brand and their workflow. But it just comes down to, if you're going to get one, you just have to do the research and see people who actually have one and what the actual workflow is. I mean, that's where the rubber hits the road. If I'm going to use this thing, can it do what I need to do? If it can, how bad is it going to be to do that? If you can understand that, if you can actually if you can imagine yourself using the machine because you know enough to understand the workflow, then you can make a smart decision if that's going to do what you need or not. That's kind of how I do it. All right. We've got a question from Dominic in the chat. They saw the live stream where I introduced my haircutting robot. They didn't like that the two moderators talked almost nonstop. I barely had a chance to talk about the robot. It's great. See, they invited me. It's not really, there's not a question to answer there, but yeah, I can talk more about the live stream. So the reason I did the live stream was that it seemed like a good thing for a few reasons. One, the St. Jude, to the best of my ability to tell, and from people that I've talked to, is a fantastic charity that's worthwhile. And so by going on it, I get to support that, which seemed like a good thing to do. It was an opportunity to build the robot, a good reason to build the robot. And so I'm going to make a video about it. So I get to make a robot for a video, which I was going to do anyway. I need a haircut, so it lines up there. And then the third reason was, I've never done, other than these live streams with 7 people, I've never done a live stream before. I didn't know what it would entail. It was an interesting experience that probably wasn't the smartest way to do it, to go on to like one of the biggest live streams of the year with like a brand new robot. I didn't really think that through. Thankfully, the robot worked, but it was a cool thing to try to do. So the point of it wasn't to replace a video and have that be the explanation of the robot and how it works. It was more just, let's raise some money from charity. Let me try to do a live stream, see what it's like, and I'll have a robot that I can make a video about later. So that's actually what I'm working on right now, is pulling together that robot. There are some issues that I've been fixing. That's what I was showing in the beginning with the different hair trimmer attachment. And I'm hoping to actually have the video next weekend. That's kind of my internal deadline right now. Could go a little longer, but I think I'm close. It's a pretty cool robot. Let me see if I can. Be right back. So I have it apart because I can't actually assemble it because, as I was saying, the TSA lost. So there's a belt that rotates the entire Z-axis. That is the first part that you install on this machine before you can assemble anything else, and they lost that. So I can't assemble it until I get a new belt, which is very frustrating. But anyway, one of the really cool things about this is that it super nicely solves the most annoying problem of the previous haircut robot, which is the vacuum routing. So on the previous robot, I had a relatively stiff shop vac hose going to the robot, and what would happen is it would just, there's so many ways for it to get kind of like kinked and form a loop and then hit the robot. So the haircutting head could nod up and down, and the hose came right out of the top of it. So when it would nod back, it would sometimes collide with the vertical axis or get caught on it. It was just an enormous pain. I ended up with, like, from my ceiling, multiple strings at extremely strategic points that would hold it just so that it wouldn't get caught. And what this does is the vacuum actually goes through here. So the shape of this orifice is, it basically allows the hair to be fully cut. There's a trimmer that goes in across the hole and cuts the hair. And if you don't have this orifice shape, the hair can sometimes go around the trimmer a little bit and it won't fully cut it. So some neat stuff there. But these rotational joints, it's being vacuumed through these joints. So the vacuum comes in, up, down, out here, and then it goes up to another rotational joint on the z-axis. And so there's no hoses hanging anywhere, and the only flexing of the hose happens in the drag chains. So it's completely controlled. And the way that these work is, you can kind of see it through this clear part here. You can see these holes moving. So there's a bearing on the top and the bottom that seal it, and then there's clearance around the part in the middle with holes. So it sucks through those holes and then up through this tube. It's kind of like a banjo bolt, if you know what those are, for hydraulic fittings, where, I guess it's kind of hard to describe. Look at a banjo bolt. It's like a banjo bolt that can rotate. And so I was pretty happy with these parts. And the cool thing about this is that I still think haircutting robots are probably a terrible idea. I don't know. I mean, they're so complicated, and the cost of a haircut is so low. I struggle to see them actually. And now there's a COVID vaccine, so the one reason to do it is going to be going away. But it's an interesting problem. And this one is significantly closer to being an actual robot than the last one. The last one was just, can I cut my hair? Can it work at all? Mostly concerned with the business end. That was where all the work was. The robot was just the minimum amount. And this is more like, could I do a thing that's more reliable that actually does it? And it's close. It can cut all the way down, so I shouldn't have a mullet. Because it uses the trimmers, it can basically go over your ear. I don't really see any way that it could cut your ear. I guess if you had like a really weird ear, it could be possible, but my ears, I cut my ear, I cut over my ear a bunch of times. There's just like no way my ear's getting cut. It's pretty cool. And so in the video, I'm going to be going into some of the mechanics, but actually a lot more of the software, because that was where a lot of the work actually was. Like, building this and printing the parts was a good bit of work, but the software was where a lot of the like real head banging happened. And so if there are things that you're interested in, let me know. And if it makes sense, I could maybe go into them in the video. It's too bad. The video I was planning to do after this, I was really excited. I was trying to make usually these project ideas start with something in my mind where I think, like, is that possible? That would be really cool. You think about it more, it's like, I think that could be done, and I think that would be really sweet. And I went through that whole process with the next potential project, which was essentially a thing that looks like a football. It probably wouldn't be pumped up because there'd be a lot of stuff inside of it. And it would be a football that you throw. Once you release it, a rocket engine ignites, and it essentially thrust vectors itself to a point that you've marked, perhaps with a laser designator or some other means. A laser designator was what I was hoping to use, with the goal of essentially being able to throw 100-yard bullets. I think that's what you call it in football. I don't actually know anything about football, to people in the end zone, I guess you call it. And certainly some very interesting and difficult control problems there. And the sensing systems are very interesting. The basic math I did suggested that it could be possible, but then everyone started telling me about ITAR. And so the export of these kinds of weapon systems is extremely no-no, even though it's a football. And so I'm probably not going to be doing that, which is too bad, because I was really excited about it. It's not worth it, though. I have a lot of other stuff I want to do, so it'll be fine. The robot's comments are very funny. Thank you. I was worried. You write these things, you're like sitting there and you're trying to think of, like, you know, what would be kind of funny to say to Matt, Pat, or whatever, and you like do it, and you're like listening to it, and it's just you, and you're like, is this stupid? This seems pretty stupid. Well, we're just gonna try it. So I'm glad that you think they're funny. Very simple question. What do I want for Christmas? I only asked for 2 things this year. I have lots of tools already, and there just isn't that many things in my list that aren't unobtainable. Like, yes, I would love a Haas CNC lathe, but that's not in the cards. So the only things that I asked for were a right angle die grinder and a little tray from my mill to hold my calipers, and spare end mills. Those are like 2 big pain points that I have that could be addressed by Christmas. So that's what I asked for. I feel the odds of me getting them are high, and so I'm feeling positive about that. But other than that, I don't know. I'm just not really. If I really need a tool, I get it when I need it. The only tools I don't get are the really expensive ones that I'm not going to ever get, or probably won't get for a very long time. So my like Christmas list isn't particularly full. Yeah, the robot comments, it's really easy. Like, when I first looked into this, it was like, well, you can just edit it, but then the Python audio, all you do is you just say, play this MP3. It's so easy. You can integrate it, and that's what I do. So when in the videos I do, you typically can't hear it very well because it was just like a computer speaker. So I enhance it so you can hear it better. Why haven't I made a PayPal link? I've been too busy. I should just do it. So I actually haven't done anything this last week since I got back from the live stream. All I've been doing is taking care of an enormously long list of things that I haven't gotten to because I was so busy with these projects. So remember, I was doing the unpickable lock. I was doing the testing the bat out, building an axe, building a golf club, and then also this live stream. It was a very busy December. Going into it, I knew that was my life, and I was okay with that. But the downside was the only possible way to get all that done was to just cut out everything else, which is what I did. I'm catching up. And that's mostly why I haven't done a PayPal link. Just in general, for better or for worse, the like revenue stuff is sort of not at the top of my priority list. I'm much more focused on the projects, which is probably isn't great for long-term success, but it's okay. Add that to my list. The other thing people were talking about is a PO box, which I need to get because it's just a good thing. Helps me from sending my address to too many people, and hopefully will save my wife from ever having to answer the door for a crazed person that tracks me down for some reason. All right. Another question. Why Stuff Made Here is the channel name? This is interesting. So when there are certain things where you do them, you are setting a long-term precedent that you're going to live with for a very long time. And sometimes you know it. Like the channel name, it's like, I'm probably going to be stuck with this forever, so I better be sure I like this. There are lots of things where you don't realize you're doing this, especially in business, where certain choices in how you architect software or architect products, people do not appreciate that this is going to be a thing that you're going to be dealing with for the next however many years. And they don't put the thought into it that they should. And I've seen that happen lots and lots of times in engineering. But for the channel name, I actually knew it was one of these things, but at the time, I had no channel. I had no idea if I was going to be successful at all. And so my cost benefit side of me was like, well, I can't put too much time trying to think about this because it's like, you know, I need to like just make some videos and see if they work. So I like knew I should put more time into it, but I didn't want to. And so when I actually started the channel, it wasn't called Stuff Made Here. I was in Boston walking to work, and that was basically the walk from the hotel I was at to work is all the thought I put into the channel name. And I decided I was going to call it Shane Does Stuff because that was extremely generic, and I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into a category of like Shane Machine Stuff or whatever, because I didn't know what I was going to do. And then, so I went to work and I made the channel, and I typed in the wrong thing. I made it Shane Makes Stuff. I don't know. And then that was the channel name for a month, maybe 6 weeks. And I was looking, I was like, this is stupid. And when I had made the channel, the little you have to provide a little icon for the channel unless you want it to be like a question mark or whatever. And so I just quickly made a little icon that said Stuff Made Here. That was a play on like a marketer guy saying like, get your stuff made here. I got stuff if you want it. And I was like looking at that, I was like, that's a lot better channel name. So you can tell Google, I want to legally change my name. And even if you're a business, they treat it as if a person is changing their name. So it was like a legal name change process, but I changed it to Stuff Made Here. That's why the channel's named that, because I didn't think about it, incorrectly named my channel, and randomly made a little icon that said Stuff Made Here. So that's why. It's probably not the strongest band. It's a long name. I prefer not having my name in it because in general, I think the stuff is the main point, not me. So I do like that, but the nuts and bolts, like when you start having promo codes, Stuff Made Here, it's kind of long, and yeah, I should have put more thought into it, but I don't dislike it. Thornstar Lightning Bolt asks, am I able to do content full time? Do I have plans to work with other creators? I am doing it full time now. As of a few weeks ago, I was on leave from work for a couple months, so I was pretty much able to do it full time then as well. And I'm finally at the point where I'm making enough to live, which is good. And work stuff was lining up. I had just shipped the Form 3, the Form 3L is shipping now. Those were kind of the two products that I was responsible for. And there's a decision of, do I want to try to do another round of product development, which is generally 3 or 4 years to fully do it from R&D to shipped and supported and bug fixed, or do I want to try to do something else? And there's a lot of things that factored into it. You know, I generally feel like I have mastery of 3D printing. I've been doing it for 8 years. At that, I mean, I was doing it before even I started working there, and I knew I would regret it if I didn't try to do this. So I'm trying. So far, so good, and that's exciting. It's weird, but I like making stuff. kind of a dream job, really. And then working with other creators. So I am going to be working with Destin some more. No firm timeline. I mean, we're actually becoming pretty good friends. I talk to him all the time, but probably in the next couple months, I'll go down there and maybe something with the bat, maybe some other stuff. We'll see. And then I'm also making the lock for the lock picking lawyer. And then there's a couple other people I'm talking to. There's a I actually probably shouldn't say the channel since it's so early, but there's a foreign channel doing some very cool stuff that is interested in having me build a thing and then go there and test said thing. And it's a really neat idea. It's actually something that I've had on my list for a long time that I wanted to do, except for they are much better positioned to test it. So that might be happening. We'll see. It really comes down to the like coronavirus travel, international stuff. Hopefully, since there's vaccines coming out, by the time that would happen, I'll be able to do it. Lots of people contact me all the time. It really just comes down to what makes sense. You know, there's all kinds of collaborations where it just doesn't seem like a good fit for the type of stuff I do and the stuff that people like. But it's fun. I really enjoyed collaborating with Destin. It's been really interesting getting to know Lockpicking Lawyer a little bit, and hopefully more. I like doing it. There's a few people that are interesting to me. I would love to collaborate with this old Tony just because I'm a huge fan. And then another guy that I think is doing really cool stuff, if you haven't seen his channel, is a dude named Tom Stanton. It's generally things involving flight, but he has some pretty cool videos of developing air engines from scratch and air-powered planes and catapults and all kinds of stuff. I think he's doing really cool stuff. So maybe someday I could find a way to do something with him. I really enjoy his stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I guess that answered your question. Jacob Gadd. With the new Tormach plasma cutter, is there any plans to add a pen plotter, or would I rather keep it stock? Yes, I would like to add a pen plotter. It's fantastic. It's so much easier to use than my last plasma cutter. Just for me, the thing with all these tools is the workflow. Like if I have an idea, how many steps does it take me to design it, convert it into whatever input the tool requires, get it made, do whatever finishing operations and so on. And my previous plasma cutter, the workflow was pretty bad and error prone, which was the worst thing, where it would fail sometimes. And so I wouldn't want to cut a bunch of stuff at once because it could fail partway through, which was practically impossible to recover from. Lots and lots of problems. And this, you just export it from the CAD. It's worked every time. There's only one problem that I've had, which was my own problem, which I had the wrong nozzle on it. And I was really mad at it and was blaming Tormach, and I realized I had the wrong nozzle, and then I fixed it. But the other pain point is the pen plotter. I don't know why some kind of marking tool is not standard if you are bending sheet metal. I guess people are typically not doing sheet metal as much. They're usually doing plate. I think that might be why. But for sheet metal work, it is so much easier. And so I'd probably going to be adding something, if nothing else, just a tool that I can put in it and draw, even if it's not fully automated. There's a modification that I did to my previous one, which allowed me to put 4 foot by 8 foot sheets of sheet metal into it, which was a pretty easy mod. I'm going to convert that over to this one when I have some time. It's really nice to be able to just put a big sheet in there, not have to cut it down. You end up saving material as well. And then the other mod that I'm going to do, I don't know if it's really a mod. It's not officially supported at the moment by Tormach, is a 4th axis. They have a port for it. They have the driver. They just don't officially sell it yet. But the 4th axis, the micro arc, I can put that into the plasma cutter. And that's something that I really want to try. I probably won't do it until I have a reason for really fancily notched tubes. But I want to do that. I think it'd be awesome. And it's something I've just always wanted to see with my own eyes. Yeah, yeah, I don't regret it. I may do at some point in the future when I have more time, I may do an even more extensive mod, which is converting it to downdraft. The water table is basically fine, but I tend to cut lots of little parts, and when those go into the water, they can just, the more and more crap I accumulate in the bottom of the tank, the harder it is to find my little parts, and I don't want to cut them with tabs or anything. So I don't know. What I'm going to probably do is find some kind of like tray that'll catch them in the meantime. If that works, then I'll probably never do it. But if I can't find a way to catch my little parts, at some point I'm going to convert it to downdraft, just because having had that, it is a lot easier for the little parts. Let's see. Just looking through my questions. So there's some questions about my power drawbar. So I don't know if you have seen it, but I have a website that is severely out of date, Shane.engineer. If you don't know about the new top-level domain names, there's an enormous number of vanity URLs like Shane.engineer that you can get. Pro tip, you should search around. Well, they're still available. That documents it, I think, pretty well. Beyond that, I don't know if there's really much I can add here about it. I'm trying to think. I guess the main thing I would say is that there are a lot of plans for these online that are simpler than the one that I did. And if I were doing it again, I would have just bought a multi-stage air cylinder from China and done that. So if I opened up the top of my Tormach, the way that it does the power drawbar is very similar to what I do, except for there isn't the complicated wedge system to amplify the force of the air cylinder. What it does is it basically stacks 3 air cylinders on top of each other that push together to triple the force, and that's just enough. So there's just a thing that rams the drawbar down, and you're done. And me making it with the wedge was a more time than money thing, but it just took so long to make that correctly. It just would have still been worth it, I think, to just buy the air cylinder. They're maybe like $200. So I would recommend doing that, and then watch out for designs that apply the force directly to your bearings. You will break them and be very sad. So that's kind of the gist of it. If there are specific questions about the calculation or design, ask in the Discord. I'm happy to talk about whatever. I really like the Discord because it's just a lot easier to like publish. When I write a blog post or a video, it takes so long to organize the information and then present it as one nice continuous thing. On Discord, it's just like, oh yeah, I did X, Y, and Z. And so happy to talk there. It is kind of my preferred communication channel. Yeah. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions. I think these were all the ones that were in the channel. Does anyone want to know anything? Anything you want me to talk about? Anything? That's totally fine if not. This is your chance. I think, there's one other thing, which is a software-only project. So it was more of a comment than a question, but I can still talk about it, I guess. So I've been wanting to make a software-only video. When I actually started making the channel, I wanted to do a software-only video first. I couldn't imagine a way, I couldn't find a way to do it that was actually entertaining, I guess. The problem is that the software stuff is just so abstract, and stuff that has good visuals you can make videos about it, but communicating the concepts I've found very hard. So the deepest I've ever gone is I made the first basketball hoop that was just the kind of paraboloid shape. That was the closest I've come to doing a pure software video, and that was very challenging to explain. And at least according to the analytics, I lost most people during that. And so, yeah, finding a way to do that in a way that people can follow, it isn't just purely weird abstract thought. That's the barrier. But I'm probably going to try it soon. I just don't have a project. But it's like one of my 2021 goals. The other 2021 goal that I have, just to kind of put it out there, and also maybe get some ideas if anyone has any. So I want to do a software only video, and then the other big goal is I would like at least one or two of my projects throughout the year to be something that is legitimately useful, and then something that I can open source, something that would be worth taking the time to open source, because a lot of the stuff I make, it's just open sourcing is a lot of work, supporting is a lot of work, and there's not a lot of benefit to doing it. But for example, the blind vision thing, it wasn't good enough to open source in my opinion, but another iteration on it that is more reliable and is actually a platform that I could imagine someone trying to make or build off of could be worth open sourcing. And so I would like, as a way to make these things more valuable for humanity, at least one or two of my projects to be something that solves a real problem that people actually have, that isn't just being entertained and learning. So if anyone has recommendations of unsolved problems in humanity that maybe, possibly I could make some progress on, I would love to hear about them. And maybe I could make a video about it and excite some people to actually do something with the open source thing. I don't want to spend my time taking anything to market because I know how hard it is and how much time it takes. But maybe if I could show a proof of concept, some other folks might be interested in doing it. So another question: has my wife done any good pranks to be even with you? Not really. I think the problem is she's too nice. She just doesn't. She doesn't think deviously the way that I do. I see a thing, I see a piece of technology, it's like, oh man, there's all kinds of stuff I could do with this. And she just doesn't think that way. So I'm trying to think. I feel like there's something, but nothing noteworthy that even comes to mind. Maybe giving me decaf coffee or something like that. That's probably about as bad as it gets for her. Alrighty, well, we're 53 minutes in. Seems like there's questions are tapped out. Hopefully this is interesting. I wonder if this time is better or worse. I'll probably do a poll because I'm just kind of doing Saturday midday, but who knows? There might be a better time. If you can think of real problems, let me know. But I've got nothing else. So I'll give you 10 more seconds if you want to ask any questions. If not, we're going to end this thing right here, right now. All right. Thanks for tuning in. As always, I'm super thankful for the support. It is extremely helpful. It is allowing me to do a lot of these things, especially the procurement of materials and improving the production quality. So it still makes me uncomfortable receiving this kind of support, but I am very thankful for it. It is very helpful. So thank you for being a patron, and I look forward to building more things. And have a good afternoon, in my case, evening, morning, wherever you are. And if you have more questions, ask on Discord. I'm usually there. Later.